Is this all about the money?
I don't think it's about the money, really. What I saw in the police over the last, 30 years when I joined it was gradually taken over by sort of liberal left types who ensconced themselves in power. So whereas when I joined, 60% of the people who joined the police would have army medals on their chest, it's now been taken over by student types. So the police has moved from being a sort of ex-soldiers led by ex-soldiers to a lot of students led, loosely managed by other students. And it's just not the right type of people. And these people are recruiting more of their people, because I was at a pass-off parade at Hendon a couple of years ago, and I think I could count one medal. So it's just the wrong type of people.
When you say the wrong type of people, look, I mean, these are the graduates who are going into policing now. Look, there was an argument that the police needed to be better educated to cope with a lot of the new crimes, which do involve, quite a lot of intelligence, and it's not a bad thing to have. I mean, given that so many of our young people are educated to college level now, but you're saying it's not just the education. You're saying they've just come with the wrong attitude. It's
common sense, and what you've got as well now. So this stop and search is a useful tool. I worked in rough areas, Brixton, Clapham, places like that, and it takes some front to do a stop and search, to stand in front of somebody and you're on your own as an officer and say, right, what are you doing here? Right, I'm going to check your pockets, try and find a knife or drugs or whatever else it is. And you need the right kind of person who's going to do that. And now they bring in half of the people they recruit now, they probably think that stop and search is racist. So, and it's an absolute deliberate policy. I was told that the previous commissioner had been asked, why don't you give some of these resettlement courses to come in the police to ex-servicemen? We don't want that type of person. Now, and so give them all the money. If you gave the police £1 billion a day, it wouldn't work, because you need the right kind of people. If you were going to set up a city right now and you said, right, who am I going to have to police this city? Am I going to have ex-forces personnel with a general in charge, or am I going to have a load of students with some student middle managers with a commissioner in divinity? Which one would you pick?
Yeah, in terms of
common sense.
In terms of whether I want to feel safe on the streets, I mean, is this the thing that the police? We went from a situation where, look, let's be honest. I mean, people talked about institutional racism with the Stephen Lawrence report.
It's a rather Soviet style.
Yeah, okay, but there's no doubt at all that there were some a good minority of bad apples, and they weren't being rooted out by the good apples, and there's lots of reasons why that happens. But the reality is that we probably have gone too far the other way, and policing has become a little bit too softly, a little bit too much about understanding. But that's partly because the police job now is, so much of it is now spent doing effectively social services job, isn't it? Looking after people who with mental health problems, dealing with other crises, and not actually policing the streets.
But there's always been those things. The police are always the backstop. When I was a young officer, the social services didn't come out at 5 o'clock in the morning. So if somebody was mentally ill or had some trauma or was homeless, the police sorted it out. That's always been like that. What's happened, though, is a drift in the police. So things like burglary, theft, things that happen to you, me, and the normal folk listening, they're seen as rather boring and stuff. So, and then we have all these hate crimes. So what would we rather investigate? Burglary, because that's quite difficult, or investigating somebody who's had a bit of a row on Facebook? And it's shifted. And the more ordinary you are, my research has shown, the more ordinary you are, the more tax you probably pay, but the worse service you get from the police. And we're told that the police don't have enough resources, but when there's a gay pride march or some virtue signalling to be done, there's always a load of officers ready for that. And I think that's what frustrates people. And I just think the police are in crisis at the moment, and all these dreadful things have come together. And the net consequence, you say about racism and all that, what kind of society are we living in that allows loads of young black men to be murdered? 5 young black men in 6 days to be murdered. Now, what's worse, having a policeman's hands in your pockets or having a knife stuck in your belly? That seems to be the choice.
I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? That there's no doubt at all that that stop and search does actually help prevent crimes. But we look. There has to be a way of doing it where it's not harassment of innocent people. And I'm thinking the body cams, particularly. And there has to be a specific reason for searching and the like. But we do need young men and women and of every colour to be fearful of being caught with a knife.
Let me give you a real example of how things have changed. So when I was in, for example, you had to you have to give reasons why you're stopping people. Now, one of those reasons could be known robber, known thief. Now, that couldn't be the only reason. You couldn't harass people just because they had a previous conviction. But if you saw somebody, you're a police officer wandering around, you see somebody, oh, it's Billy Burglar there, and you think, and you see it's late at night, and you think, oh, right, and he's looking at it, right, that gives you grounds, right, has he got any screwdrivers, tools on him? The government removed that. So they said, the fact that somebody's got previous convictions cannot be used as a grounds to stop and search. That's crazy. And it all came from academics, and it was this racism thing driven time and time and time again. But as I say, what's the worst? We've now got 5 dead black guys in 6 days. That's a terrible society that we live in. And these people, this is what they've created.
Okay, what about this use of the word disease? Some people are saying that we need to treat this knife crime epidemic like a disease.
The latest fantasy. It's the latest thing that politicians... So you've got Sadiq Khan, who promised to reduce stop and search. That was one of his key manifesto promises. All politicians are guilty of this, left and right. But this disease thing, if you look at the Glasgow thing, Glasgow is a very, very different place from London. And also, there was lots of stop and search there. There's all sorts of... But they've latched onto this. They've latched onto this because they need to justify why they stop things in the first place. So the people who are now making the decisions are the ones who made all the problem in the first place.
I mean, it seems to me, as someone who's certainly not an expert in law and order, I know a lot of police officers have been interviewing people on this issue on all sides for many years. There's some really simple stuff that motivates people to commit crime, and it's or doesn't prevent them from committing crime. And it comes down to whether you've got other life opportunities, you're busy, you've got something to lose, your chances of getting caught, your chances of getting convicted, and your chances of actually being punished for it. And the reality is, people aren't being punished. We know yesterday's amazing statistics: 4 out of 10 people who are caught with a knife a second time don't go to jail. That's in defiance of the actual law passed by Parliament that said you get caught with a knife a second time, you go to jail, no ifs, no buts. And we're not even seeing that. But the reality is, most people know if they commit a crime, they are not going to be caught for it. They don't care. And even if they are caught, they're not really that bothered. And most of these young people with knives, they are more scared of another 15-year-old with a knife than they are of the police. Yeah,
I agree. Absolutely. I mean, you're right to say. And the judges, the people who are in charge of the police, the same people are judges. This liberal left attitude that they're helping people by not sending them to prison, etc., etc. But what they do is they inflict these people on working class communities. So the judge, he doesn't live in the council estate in Brixton, he lives far away. And so these people are sent back, and it's a misery. Working class people often suffer because of these decisions, because people perceive, oh, we won't send him to prison, he's had a bad life. But then they inflict them on everybody else. And sometimes if you have that sharp shock, it might make them think again. But also with these gangs, what we do, we don't think long term. So you get caught with a knife, you go to prison, and then you're let out and you're allowed to go right back to where you were and in the gang. We need to do long-term strategy. We mustn't let them go back to that life. And also, what do we do about the younger brother of that lad who's now with a knife or dealing drugs or being violent? How do we intervene in that family? Because there's no doubt in my mind that younger brother will follow on. So there has to be, it's all right to talk about diseases. These are all common sense things, what I'm saying. We need to intervene in these families. With all this lefty nonsense, so you're labelling people. No, we're not labelling. We're trying to help. I was involved in the Army Cadets in Brixton. Again, after finishing work in, police shift, I went off with the Army Cadets helping the kids there. So that was my commitment to helping people. But there's got to be a better strategy than just locking them out, letting them out and say, oh, go back to your gang.
Mick Neville, there'll be people cheering at the radio right now listening to your common sense. Can you take over from Cressida Dick, please? He's former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector Mick Neville. Thank you very much.